Hello, hello, hello. I hope people can find this one because I don't know, something went haywire, and there's like this is the fifth live Edgar Cayce number 14 life skills study that is out there right now. I don't know, folks. Something's going a bit wonky, and honestly, it's probably as I'm going to try to move this up for you. It's probably because my office is not put together right and stuff was moving about and whatnot. So I'm going to actually try to see if I can tell that I'm live. Wouldn't that be cool to know if I am live? Isn't that such an interesting way to put things? So I believe I am, but I also know that there's like five other postings out there saying I'm going live. So I'm going to assume most people won't be able to find this one. Jeez. Anyways, folks, I apologize for that. I'm in the middle of moving things around my office, and so the equipment is not fully really set up as well as it needs to be. So I apologize for that. If you are new here, I'm Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light. Nice to meet you. This is going to be an Edgar Cayce life skills study. Number 14, we are in his biography. I kind of flip flop. I do some of his biography, and I correlate it with mine, oftentimes because there's a lot of similarities. And then I add in. We do an episode that's from one of his books, one of his materials from his readings. I find it always interesting that when I set out, let me rephrase this. I apologize. I set out to do this to basically bring 100 years forward, and it is definitely showing me why in a lot of ways when we come together and go through the material and go through this and that. 100 years ago, we were in this very odd, at the turn of the century from 18th to the 19th, right? And now we're in this 20th to, the 19th to the 20th time period. Um, so many similarities, and it's interesting to see it kind of unfold here. And that was the point of doing this. And thank you, Susie and Lori, for coming in the chat and finding me. I appreciate you all so very much. So today I'm going to do a small bit about his bio because it actually is going to bring in a topic that I became very frustrated over the weekend with. Because I know of the current energies and the energies of 2024 and aspects that will be there, that when we talk about this part in his bio, um, it can also coincide with what got me frustrated over the weekend. So I love when that happens, synchronicities, right? I love it. And currently we are when we're doing his other material, we are in the secrets of the universe and how to apply them to your life. And a lot of it's talking about relationships and gender roles and how people don't really understand them either, or not even gender roles. Kind of like how we've been talking heavily about the female energy, the feminine energy is actually the energy of the mind. Many don't think that way, but protective energy and service energy is actually masculine. It's very interesting that we change those. It's very interesting that we allow that to be what is programmed into us, right? So I also wanted to say, going forward with this stuff, with Edgar Cayce stuff, it's become very illuminated to me. It's become very The light's been shined on a few things that I might end up jumping around a bit of his books and materials. I'm not sure. Like all this jazz about aliens. I, you know, um, I started thinking yesterday. I said, why are people like freaking out or, why are they scared? Why are they scared? To think that you are the only one here, yeah, or we're the only ones around, is absurd. But I was like, why are they scared? Why do they think that's always going to be an attack? And I will tell you that most things in culture, they move about every 30 years. It's recycled every 30 years. So I was actually watering my plants, and I'm thinking about this, and I was like, when was that movie Independence Day? When did it come out? Because they tell us, they do tell us through media and movies and all that jazz what is going on. You just got to jump 30 years later. Um, and also in what happens in society, right? The themes of society, which is what we're going to be talking about today somewhat. Um, so when I got done watering plants, I looked up when did the movie Independence Day come out? Because I was like, that movie made everybody terrified of this concept in New World, like in the new age of CGI, and now what we grew up in the 50s and 60s of, aliens attack and stuff. Not that stuff, but CGI really made that like, whoa. That was in 1996. It was the blockbuster of 1996. I remember that summer. It was the blockbuster then. So they're just setting the stage, really. Aliens are not, aliens are just like us. Good ones, bad ones, indifferent ones. What the heck? So that had nothing to do with today. It has to do with, though, my train of thought of thinking about delving into other aspects of Cayce's readings coming soon. Robert, it is good to see you in the chat. Milky Way Soul Tribe. Robert, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I do say hello to everyone that comes in the chat. It'd be interesting, Robert, to do another video about gardening because, with the flippy floppy of the polls, things are going to have to change up for people in many ways. So, all right, we are in his biography. And if we can go back to the last biography portion, we were talking about when Cayce finally got into Hopkinsville, which was like a much bigger town than he was used to. It was bustling and businessmen and women dressed nice, and he got that job at the bookstore where he read all the books as we were talking about before, quote unquote. And he was meeting all these people. I want to point out to everyone, this was a young man that he and his parents decided for him to just drop out of school and not go into higher education because what if the world found out about your gifts? They would ostracize you. This was a young man that had a year or so of debauchery, trying to avoid his gifts and be what he referred to a real man, quote unquote. And then when his grandmother passed, who told him his gifts were beautiful and fine and a gift from God to help people find the fruit of life, he went into Hopkinsville. Remember, he had this whole spirit, some kind of spirit voice spoke to him and said, you gotta leave now. He was working on his uncle's farm, and he just turned to his uncle and he said, I'm going to Hopkinsville. And he just left that day. He just left. He just walked away. Literally walked away and took the long way to walk away without knowing what he was going to do. So now he's meeting all these people. By the time we were done talking about that part of his biography, we were talking about how he loved listening to all the different preachers around there, pastors around there. He loved the church. how he was meeting all these interesting people coming into the bookstore. And one of them was that author that was so impressed with Cayce's retell of that author's book. He invited him to a reading that night. Cayce's meeting a lot of fascinating compared to growing up in a tobacco farming town where there was only like two families really operating there, the Majors and the Cayces. This is big. He's finally getting to feel and get an idea of who he is in society. Which this is going to be a struggle for a long time for him, though. Okay, but he loves talking with people and being with people. Remember, he was this kid that we would refer to as precocious, maybe in today's world, but he wasn't that because it was out of compassion and love. But he was just at a higher conscious level that he talked with most adults. He loved it, right? So he gets to experience this stuff as a young man now, being in Hopkinsville, working at the bookstore. I apologize. I might take some sips of water throughout this episode. I shut down all the air conditioning in this room when I record so it won't irritate the sound, and I'm under two different spotlights, so it gets very hot really fast. Oh. So like I said, he liked meeting a bunch of different pastors and listening to their sermons. And this is at the time, turn of the century. This is at the time that spiritualism is very high, it's very in effect, but also is church revivals. I mean, this is when church revivals were doing their thing. I have yet to seen revivals be like that between the turn of the century and into probably about the early 60s. I mean, they seriously on fire, man. Those revivals were big and triumphant for what they were trying to do. So he was also going to a lot of revivals because revivals would bring in pastors, preachers from different areas to kind of market their revival. You know, come to this revival, this pastor, that pastor, this pastor, and they still do that. They do still do that. I have family members that are preachers, and they will travel around and go be a guest speaker at this church and a guest speaker at that church. But the revival scene it was big. It was really good and really big. And to the point that, I don't know if people know this, but I mean, he got to listen to Booker T. Washington at one of these. I mean, it was revivals at the turn of the century would be not just church based, but it would also be political. It would be those who wanted to preach about equality. There was a lot happening. It was a lot happening, and it was a good time. I think people might forget, but it was a good time. Music, potluck food, games for the kids. I mean, it was good times. Okay, and Lori just said in the comments they were pretty intense in the 60s growing up. Yes, I would say, well, this is going to be the part of the topic that we're talking about today towards the end. Towards the 70s, when it became very apparent cults are in full effect, I think the revivals backed down a little bit so they wouldn't look so possibly cultish. Yes, we are going to be talking about cults at the end because of the energy that we're going into and what we're talking about here, right? So that's foreshadowing for the end of today. So at one of so he would go to all these revivals, go to all these guest preachers and listen to their sermons. And one of them, I actually had never heard of this name, or no, I heard of the name, but I didn't know he was as successful as he was. I did not know that. Dwight L. Moody. He had come into town, and Edgar was already going to go see him, right? But his neighbor's cow got loose. So one morning he was actually going out to find the cow for his neighbor, which I have to tell you, my grandma, there's a lot of stories in my family about grandma having to go get the neighbor's cow. I will tell you, I was in a tornado once, and we were in the coal cellar of my grandma's yard, and we saw a cow fly by. There's a lot. It's not so easy to just go get a cow. It's not easy. So anyways, Edgar is going to go find this cow. And there's a man sitting there at I think it was kind of by a river, by a brook, and there's a bench there, and he's just sitting there relaxing in the morning. And this is early in the morning, 5 in the morning, sunrise a bit. And the gentleman on the bench said, you're probably looking for the cow. It's right over there. Like, he's right there. And Edgar said, okay, thank you. And noticed that the cow wasn't leaving. Like, the cow was just drinking its water, chilling. So he actually started talking with the man. And it ended up being Pastor Moody. And the conversation was so nice. And of course the pastor said, hey, come to the sermon tonight. And Edgar did that and of course he got the cow back to its proper place. But throughout the week long, that pastor was in Hopkinsville for a week. Throughout the week long sermons, different sermons every night, by the way, every morning Edgar would go and meet him at that bench, and they would talk about a lot of things. Remember, Edgar had a thirst for knowledge, and for him in particular, it was aspects of the Bible, and how this preacher was presenting things was very different than he had heard before. And he got to learn some of his backstory. He had ended up preaching in London for years and ended up saving, quote unquote, or converting, quote unquote, or how they represent themselves, like 250,000 of a people. I will tell you guys, that's Europe. That's not easy. That's not easy. So this man clearly had some kind of special gift about him. I will tell you, in biblical terms, when they start talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and one of them is referred to as prophecy. Prophecy also, when we listen to a preacher or somebody on YouTube or anyone really that captivates you, that kind of has that charisma that you feel is speaking straight to you, that actually goes under the category in Christianity, the gifts of the Spirit, as prophecy. Oftentimes people are like, gift of prophecy, does that mean foreseeing the future? There's actually many categories that goes into that spiritual gift. And definitely, if you feel like that preacher or whoever you're listening to is speaking straight to you, that actually goes into the gift of prophecy. That is also very, very closely related to charisma. We're going to talk about this later. So clearly, this Dwight L. Moody clearly had that gift to be able to influence and preach to 250,000 of people in London. Truly, that would be a gift. We're going to keep going though with this, because Edgar, on the very last day that he knew that preacher was leaving town, it was going to be their last one-to-one conversation as they sat there on the bench in front of this beautiful little brook. Edgar finally kind of broke down. He felt that comfortable and sincere with this gentleman and safe to finally ask, as he is in this new town, Hopkinsville, where he was always told, don't tell anybody about your gifts. Don't even use them in any way, shape, or form. Be careful who you even talk to and become friends with, right? He felt safe and secure enough to talk to this preacher, and he asked him a question. He said, let me get it right. He said, I'm at his dream. He asked Moody if God had ever spoken to him. He asked God, or he asked Moody if God had ever spoken to him. And then he started breaking down the times that the angels came, the times that he heard the voice that actually got him to Hopkinsville, of like, you need to leave this farm now. Just go. He talked about the little people. He talked about talking to his grandfather in the tobacco barn. He talked about all this stuff with this man. And then just sat there. Just sat there waiting. Waiting. He was actually waiting to be told you were completely wrong. It is completely wrong because the Bible says it's wrong. It must be the devil, right? And this beautiful being turned to him and said, you know, there's a lot in the Bible that says that is the devil. Don't trust anybody that hears from God, quote unquote. That's the devil talking to him. But he then quoted from the book of Numbers, which I gotta tell you, nobody even reads the book of Numbers, so I'm already digging this guy. He quoted, "Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream." So then they had this lovely conversation that things can happen. God does speak to people. Do you know how I'm really trying to emphasize how much Cayce needed this conversation. Cayce really needed this conversation, because oftentimes too, at those big revivals, at some point it would become, y'all are going to hell. At some point, the fire and brimstone would come out at some point, right? Because that's the best sale. That's the best sales speech you can have to go into this organization. That if you don't follow, you're going to hell. So it would always come out too. So we would also be hearing that. And then he sits with this lovely man. He sits with this lovely man who says, hey, things happen. And then Moody shared his own story. And he said he was actually in Cleveland doing a 7-day, visit at one of the churches there. And by the third night or so, a voice told him to go to London. He had never been to London. He wasn't sure what was going to happen. A voice said go to London, but he knew that he trusted himself enough and his connection with God that he knew to trust this voice, even though he didn't know what was going to happen. And so he told all of his people in the church, I'm leaving. Sorry, I'm going to leave tomorrow. I can't even finish this week. I'm leaving. I'm going to London. And why? I don't know why. I'm going to London. And even them around him, Moody was scared to say, I believe the voice of God told me to go. He gets to London, and he did not know what to do with himself. He had no idea. Like, that was it. That was the only instruction. Go to London. And he was there for a few days, and he's walking around aimlessly, pretty clueless. And he's actually in one of the more low-income areas. Think turn of the century still. Because Cayce's conversation with this man happened in 1898. And this is post-Moody's London time period. So he was probably there in 1870s, 1880s, something like that. He's walking around the low, impoverished areas of London, and he sees this window that has this beautiful orchid actually growing. It threw him off, and it was a beautiful flower, and the colors drew him in, right? And then all of a sudden he hears what he thought was angelic singing. And he kind of has to go around to the back, and the door is open, and he walks in, and it's this young girl singing. And the moment he walks in, this girl goes, "Oh, Reverend Moody, I knew you were going to come. God told me that you were going to come. My prayers have been answered. I knew you were going to come, Mr. Moody. I've been praying for you to come because the people here need you. I saw you in a newspaper clipping." This little girl had been praying and praying and praying for who knows however long. And then some voice tells Moody to go to London. Somehow that flower drew him in. He then started doing little church meetings in her room. I mean, think tenement, right? Think a small room, London, probably like the size of a tenement. He started holding little church groups there, then it expanded and expanded and expanded, and he was there for a few years. So he tells Edgar this. He said, if I didn't know the Bible and didn't know where it also said, hey, some of you I am going to talk to some of you. I am going to be with some of you. If he didn't know that, he wouldn't have followed. And so it was very good for Edgar to hear this. He had his grandmother saying it, but his grandmother was also married to a lovely, gifted human being for a long time. So you could also kind of confuse that of like, of course she would say that. She loves me. She's my grandmother. She loved my grandfather. This is a complete outsider with an amazing credentials in the field of Edgar wanted to be a pastor. I guess I forgot to remind everybody that. He wanted to be a pastor. And this pastor even said, when Edgar said he wanted to do it, he even said, and I'm going to quote the book here, Moody advised him to be true to that vision, being a pastor, but to know that there were many different ways to serve God besides being a pastor. He could do so in missionary work or by merely persuading others to read the Bible. To just read the Bible. To just read. To just read. This was so good for him. To have an outsider that he had such esteem for to say, you're not a freak. You're not a freak. I actually want to go to, I'm going to read from the book. This is his biography. I mostly do recall with his biography, and sometimes I read it. This is, because I can't read the whole thing because of copyright issues. This is Edgar Cayce, an American prophet. Remember, he is referred to as the sleeping prophet. He is referred to as the American prophet. He's referred to a lot of things based around that word prophet, which this is why we're going to be talking about things towards end. I'm going to go into his dream, and then I'll go into, I'm going to bring it 100 years forward. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so Edgar, years later, was reflecting on a dream that happened quite often. And he talked to people, he told people about it. And remember, the same with, he had a dream before this. He had a dream about him and the woman walking in the woods, and then the clearing, and it was like the trees were in pyramids, and then a being came and gave him this cloth, and he said, just lay the cloth out. And after years later, reflecting on it, Cayce realized that that dream had nothing to do with like the woman he was going to be with in life. It had to do with him accepting his gifts and working with them and not against them, working with them instead of hiding them. Well, now he's had another dream that I'm about to read, another layer of acceptance that he understands more so later. So I'm going to read this to you. I was sitting alone in the front room playing solitaire when there was a knocking at the front door. When I went to the door, a gentleman whom I did not recognize asked, Cayce, I want you to go with me to a meeting this evening. This is all a dream, guys. At first I said, but I seldom go out in the evening. He insisted I should go with him, and I did. As I went out, I realized that another person was waiting for us in the street. We walked on as if into the air, like kind of gliding, because it's a dream, right? Up and up until we came to where there seemed to be a large circus tent. So he's saying we walked as if we were gliding in air, but then he said up and up and up. We kind of rose. This is a dream. Until there's somewhere above, and there's like this circus tent waiting for them. We approached the flag of the tent, and as he pulled the flag back, I, for a first time, realized that the two men with whom I had been walking were Evangelicus Moody and also Sam Jones. Sam Jones was actually very big in that area. Sam Jones, he traveled, but it was, I think, more like Midwest. But Sam Jones was big, and he was actually one of Cayce's favorite pastors to listen to. So he just realized as they're pulling back the flap of the tent, walking in, that he's now recognizing who these two people are. In Cayce's dream, he, Moody, and Jones entered the tent, which was filled to overflowing with inspirational religious leaders, some with whom Edgar recognized and some he did not. And then Cayce remembered, it seemed that there was lightning in the distance. With the lightning there was no noise, not of thunder, but of wind. Yet nothing seemed to stir. So, I'm sorry, I said no noise. There was noise, but it wasn't of thunder. So you're seeing thunder, bolts of lightning. Not thunder noise, but there was a noise that seemed more like wind. Like maybe howling wind? I don't know. But nothing was moving, nothing was blowing. When I asked one of my companions what it was, I was told, "The Lord our God will speak to us." Then a voice, clear and strong, came as forth out of the cloud and the lightning, and said, "Who will warn my children?" Then from out of the throne came the throne of the Master. So out of this lightning came like the throne of the Master. He spoke something. I will warn my brethren. The answer came back. So one of the pastors said, "I will do it. I will do it." And the answer came back, "No, the time is not yet fulfilled for you to return." So clearly, somebody who might have passed on was like, "I'll do it. I'll warn all of your children." Then Mr. Moody spoke and said, "Send Cayce. He is there now." Then the Master said, "Father, Cayce will warn my brethren." So if you're in religious text here, that would be like Christ saying, "Father, Cayce will warn my brethren." All of those humans, all of your children. Cayce can do it. He's there now. Cayce can do it. What a mighty, mighty dream. What a what a dream, folks. And to tell you the truth, that's how they end that chapter. Warn my brethren. Cayce, the American prophet, asking these or finally having a conversation. If you have these gifts, doesn't mean you're talking to the devil. And of course, no, it's not. And as we learn, especially here, as we keep learning about him, we're going to learn the struggles. We're going to learn the insights. We're going to learn what it's like to actually have the gifts. We're going to learn how, if you think you might have certain gifts, how to accept them more, right? With grace and love and integrity and self-compassion. Why I'm bringing this, it was interesting because we were in this biography at this time anyways. Him having another round of acceptance. Another round of, I need to use my gifts to help the world. It went another level. First, it was a level of accept your gifts and accept that, you're not going to be a freak. Love yourself entirely. They are a part of you. It was more about him and becoming more integrated with his gifts. This was that next level of, okay, I can help the people. What his grandmother was really trying to say, what the first dream was really trying to say, now the second dream, and accredited pastor telling him, "You're okay." It's all kind of coming into play. But it's still going to end up being a struggle for various reasons at different times. We have now, though, talked about what the spiritual gift of prophecy looks like in some forms or another. So let's really talk about that. Let's really talk about what it is to be a prophet. There's reasons why I'm bringing this up. I'm going to start there. I'm going to tell you what drove me crazy this weekend. Very much so drove me crazy. I was full in my 3D, this is not okay mode. Recently, Netflix put out a 6-part series called How to Become a Cult Leader. It just came out over this weekend. And many of the stars here, you guys know that I did study that stuff. Because it intrigued me, but it intrigued me to never be that. That's why I was really trying to understand, how could this possibly ever happen? Also because I was raised with my mother who did astrology back then. And she was very good at astrology. It was back when it'd be nothing but books and calculators and, protractors and, yeah, I mean, you had to do the stuff manually. It wasn't like the computer, right? Um, and a lot in my chart, and this is not to boast, but I do also understand why, and that's why we're going to talk about the gift of prophecy. A lot of my birth chart, if I was not a well-adjusted human being, if I did not go through heal myself entirely, because trust me, I probably did use some of this stuff when I was young. A lot of my birth chart would have a lot of the characteristics of being a very successful cult leader. So my parents, coming out of the 70s, were always like, Courtney, no, don't go to church, don't go to groups, like, stay away, like, just don't do it. But they would say this, and they were worried about that, of me joining one and then taking over, basically. So I, as a young person, I studied a lot of it, like, how does that even happen? So I could also know, and this is also through my healing and wanting to be a better individual. So I could also know what comes very naturally to me. How can that be used in that way so I don't ever do that? Like, what's the key to never be like that, right? Because it's horrible and deplorable. Well, I'm watching this Netflix series, 6-part series, How to Become a Cult Leader. I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. Was a lot of it basics that people would know? Yeah. Did they throw in some stuff that maybe the general public doesn't know? Yeah. How they presented it, though, was absolutely terrifying, with knowing the energies that are going to be starting August all through 2024 into 2026. I've said it here a few times, maybe a handful of times, and I said, I'm not really going to focus on that right now because it's not the biggest issue, and we're going to see what happens about starting now in August, which that came out this weekend. I'm going to tell you even more about it. That the potentiality of prophets, grand masters, new voices, all sorts of stuff are going to be coming out of the woodworks. All of a sudden, the alchemist is going to come out of their caves. That had it already, the potential of the energy, it's going to happen already. But I was thinking, oh, maybe it'll just be low key. Low key. It's good. We're fine. I don't even have to really talk about this. And then Netflix put that out there. And they referred to it in every episode as your game book. It was a play-by-play of how to become a cult leader. And they said the word you, Y-O-U, countless times. You could be that cult leader. You could do this. You can do that. You can do it. To the point that the last words of the 6-part series was, the last words. After you've repeatedly, probably binged, hearing a voice tell you, you can do this. Now, if this happens, if this arises while you're trying to build your cult, this is what you do in your game book, in your playbook. So if this is an obstacle, this is how you overcome it. A lot of stuff that people might not get or didn't generally know, right? They added a lot to the mix and then kept telling everybody, you can do this too. To the point that the last words Two women commentary and then a voiceover speaking. One of the women said, and right now is a perfect time to become a cult leader. Right now, the world is, in chaos and shambles, and people are vulnerable. Right now is a perfect time. Then they go to the next woman clip, and she said, oh, yeah, right now is a perfect time to be a cult leader because you don't have to control humans, you only have to control algorithms, and that's a lot easier. Then it was the voiceover that then said, so which are you going to choose? To be a cult leader or a follower? In a world of predator and prey, what are you going to choose? That was the last few lines of it. I lost my mind, folks. I lost my mind. I lost my mind. I lost my mind. Knowing that the energies are already here for charlatans, fakes, very potential cult leaders, false prophets, all of that to just be coming out of the woodworks. And now Netflix gave them a very good playbook. And the only thing I can kind of rely on is that there is an aspect to it, and people have to have charisma. You've got to know charisma, and that is the part that is attached to also the spiritual gift of prophecy. It is in there. Prophecy has many categories, right? It is in there though, and that you're born with. That's the only thing that I can hopefully rely on. That it's not going to just be everybody trying to be a cult leader, because not everybody's got charisma. They just don't. They don't. Nor does everybody really have all of the ins and outs of the gift of prophecy, which, like I said, part of it is charisma. Part of it is spiritual gifts of psychic variety, telepathy, being able to foresee, as we would call prophet. Also, very in tuned empaths, right? Very, very in tuned empaths, to the point that based on just what they're feeling off of you knows exactly what's going on. All of that can also be under the category in the biblical way of prophecy. Not just, some of those also intermix with exaltation, but really it all goes under the category of prophecy in biblical terms. So yeah, I got frustrated. I got extremely frustrated because for months now, I know I've mentioned it, but I was putting it all on the back burner. Like, we're not going to worry about this until it presents itself. And I know, I'm hoping people are much more educated and can see when they're being swindled. But this Edgar Cayce life skill study is drawing so many parallels to the turn of the century then as to the turn of the century now, that now, who knows? Because at that time, that spiritualist movement, there were so many false people there. There were so many, even with the revivals that we were just talking about, that was solely to start a whole new branch of Christianity. Let's be this. Very complex times that people were using these alternative powers and gifts in false ways for money and greed and power. For money, greed, and power. This is also where a lot of your societies started, more so. I mean, the Masons had been here forever, right? Other societies have been here forever, but this was when more occult societies started. Well, some of those, I have to tell you, is we're probably going to go from Cayce into those, the cults groups. Some of those ended up just being, you know, literally cults. Not occult, cults. Also the rise of like the KKK, things of that nature. So this can all be at play again right now. So let's have discernment. It was very interesting to me personally that the week leading up to that being released on Netflix, I talked to 3 different people that week about having discernment going forward. It was just the theme of the week, I guess, for me, was trying to talk to people about how to establish discernment for themselves. And I was giving some examples. Watch out for this, watch out for that. Discernment. So now, and then I see that on Netflix, lose my mind, and I'm reading where we are in Cayce to refresh my mind where we're at, and I went, there might be a lot of people that have some gifts. They got some gifts. Awesome, we all have gifts. You have gifts. I have gifts. We are all beautiful spiritual beings that are learning our mastery presence, who know that we are evolving to higher consciousness, and that higher consciousness creates form out of the formless. We all are doing that. It's those who are going to market it. It's those that are going to tell you that they're there to save you. It's those who you might feel are speaking straight to you. The biggest thing that I can say right now, because now I'm actually like, you gotta be kidding me. Beloved Cayce, Edgar, was referred to as the American prophet, and he actually does have that right, in my opinion. The one thing to pay attention to for your own discernment, because now I think it's going to be a weird flood of this stuff, for your own discernment. If anyone, and I don't care what religion or culture either, because there's a lot of cultural aspects that go into things, and or religion, that there's a hierarchy to stuff. There's a ton of hierarchy in the vast majority of organized any form of religion. And then hierarchy ends up joining these new age groups as well. If there is any hierarchy, that's a flag. That's a flag. Also, if the people at the top of that hierarchy are limiting you or representing themselves as I am the voice of reason, or limiting you in any way, saying that they have the gifts but you don't, that are not trying to empower you, not trying to encourage you, not trying to teach you how you are just as magical and wonderful and amazing as anyone else. If they're not doing that, if they're holding you back in any way, shape, or form, without giving practical, good reasons why. I mean, sometimes we gotta hold people back, right? To be like, hey, you gotta learn your ABCs before you write a sentence. But if they are holding you back and you are perfectly ready to rock and roll, that's a red flag. The heart of a true prophet is of the people always. The heart of a true prophet is somewhat of a bleeding heart. That is Cayce's problem, and it always was Cayce's problem. It's most people's. If they are true, actual prophets. Think of, here's an example, John the Baptist. Okay? John the Baptist. I'm just going to grab from the Bible real quick. You could even put other prophets in this. You really can. You could put vistas in this. But take John the Baptist. Um, that old boy, man, he was a prophet. He was touched by God. He was very gifted. He was amazing. I mean, heck, he's the one that baptized Jesus. He was great. He was technically homeless, usually very hungry, looked like a madman, um, but was the most kind and gentle to nature, humans, everything. He was just preaching the word the whole time because he thought that that was what was right for humans, to his own detriment of hunger, dirty, homeless, looking like he's crazy, being kicked out, sometimes beaten out of towns, right? His heart was for humanity, not for his own benefits. That goes for all true prophets. It goes for all true prophets. So, now that there might be a massive rise in weird cult crap, please have discernment going forward, because the New Age movement has already been infiltrated big time. I don't even like the term New Age because, no, because of that, and I never liked that term anyways. I'm That's the best discernment you can have right now. That in the New Age movement, which is most of the stuff you're going to see on YouTube, and it can go across the board. Self-help, what I do here, unfortunately, it can go across the board from self-help to New Age to spiritual to ancient to alchemy to all of it, as you guys can probably assume, astrology. If you start seeing people, because it's already been infiltrated, it's already, and oftentimes some of these poor people, some of these unfortunate souls, and there's a lot out there, the ones that are real big, right? They're real big because it's insidious. It's slow too. Some of these real big names out there who, and honestly, I don't think they're teaching anything all that grand, but apparently they're grand up here. But then if you see other things, it's like, whoa, that's not a good human. Unfortunately, when you get so big, people start taking over as well. They start telling you how you need to look, what you need to dress like, dress, look, style, how much you need to market, how much, it becomes a business. It becomes a business, period. I know a lot of people kind of in my community have started reading Dolores Cannon. Nothing against Dolores. I think Dolores Cannon is really good for beginners. I really do. I think she's great for beginners. But I will tell you from my own personal experience, many, many, many moons ago, it got the feeling that that business wants you to very much stay with Dolores Cannon. Only read Dolores Cannon, which she's got 1 million books. Only be with her and her philosophies and her thoughts and her prophecies. It became very apparent to me how that business was run. So not so much on her, because what happens, same with Cayce as we go further in his biography, the same thing was happening to him. So unfortunately, some of these people could potentially be just beautiful beings wanting to do the right thing, and then business gets a hold of them. But it doesn't matter, because the side effects are on you. They come towards you. You're the one that will be carrying it. So have discernment moving forward, especially now that supposedly we can all become cult leaders. And in a world full of predator and prey, what are you going to be? I can't believe they ended it that way. What are you going to choose? I cannot believe they ended it that way. Sorry, and I know I'm a little bit on my rant. I can believe it. I actually can believe it. Um, I might Friday actually. I was thinking Friday. Normally my 11 o'clock would be the star conscious stuff, but I'm thinking I might just do a social commentary on all this stuff. From the flippy floppy and the poles and climate change, from aliens to this cult stuff, to what goes on in this world, to the pronoun gender stuff going on. I was thinking about doing one big social commentary to bring sense to the madness based on the energies that are happening. That's what I was going to do, or I'm thinking about it. I have not made that decision yet, though. So, lovely people, if you have gifts, and your gift might not be the gift of prophecy. Your gift could be beautiful. Your gift could be that. Channeling and prophecy are not the same thing, by the way. Channeling and prophecy are not the same. I know plenty of channelers and they have nothing to do with prophecy. Prophecy is, like I said, it's got characteristics to it. You can foresee the future. You can see it. Those that can truly access, like the Akashic, that's prophecy. There's other elements to it. Those who, I personally, I think telepathy is a little bit a part of it. But like I said, you tend to have a little bit of a bleeding heart. You might have a little bit of charisma with you. You might have a very deep already knowing, very deep empathic knowing, that when you meet someone, you already know, you already see, you already got it, you already got the story. You're usually, you do hang out with the older crowd. When you were younger, you rather have been with adults than with your peers. Edgar had that problem. I had that problem. I did not understand my peers, and to tell you the truth, I somewhat still don't, unless depending on who they are. I never understood them when I was younger, though, and I never understood why they were teaching me what they were teaching me in school when there were such bigger issues to handle in life, such bigger issues to handle, homelessness and all sorts of stuff that was riding on my heart. That I was like, what's the point of what you're teaching me? Look, do you not see what's happening in the world? The Cold War was still happening. Do you not see what's going on? They have those kind of child lives. They just see a bigger picture. When they read something, they take it in differently. They see the whole picture, the whole scope. That's aspects of prophecy. That's why when they are delivering a sermon or they are speaking here on the YouTube, it feels like they're talking directly to you. There's other aspects to that, but that's more of the insidious parts of it. If you feel that people are speaking directly to you, it might be, they might be conscious of it, they might not, they might just have the natural gift of it. They were actually talking about in that Netflix series of like code switching, and I do that naturally. I do it naturally. This is why there's a lot in my chart, guys. There's a lot in my chart. I do it naturally, and I don't even think about it because it's been natural my whole life, and that's how I've always flowed. But what it is you could be in front of a large group of people, and you're flowing in and out of dialect and topic and you're meeting everybody where they're at. Okay? And I literally mean that. You flow in and out of dialect and topics and this and that. And I know you've all have actually witnessed it here with me, because it happens. that is not prophecy. That is a skill that people either learn or you're born with it. So watch out for people that do that you question their heart. You know what I mean? Just have discernment, guys, all over the place. Just discernment. Discernment. Now it's definitely going to be needed going forward. Definitely going to be needed. So I thank you all who came in the chat. Miss Chloe, Coke Queen. Oh, Jackie, good to see you. Lori, moderator, thank you for blessing us with your attendance. Susie, Robert from Milky Way Soul Tribe, thank you all for coming in and listening. We'll talk a bit more about this possibly on Friday. Like I said, Friday I think I might just do a social commentary about why things are based on the energies going forward and how to have more discernment in all directions, right? In all concepts and directions, because it's your personal discernment. But things that we can always throw in there, what to watch out for and what to think about, right? So thank you all for coming. This was Edgar Cayce Life Skills Study number 14. We talked about his bio. Thank you all. If this is your first time being at Stars of the Morning Light, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. It's a great community here. And for anybody that wants to jump on board with the patrons, our next class is this Sunday night, like $8 a month. I teach there twice a month. There's a lot going on with the patrons, and this Sunday class is going to be paramount in their moving forward and learning a great deal. So keep it up, patrons. You're doing awesome. They're so wonderful. That's what I'm saying. There's the discernment, guys. Here's the discernment. Sunday's my birthday. I care so much about them doing great in life and becoming masters themselves that I'm going to be hanging out with them on my birthday. That's how much someone who is not a charlatan, who is not a cult leader, cares. Truly cares, right? That sees everyone as equal and as beautiful and magical in their own right. So, I love you all dearly. Thank you all for coming, and have a blessed next few days. I'll see you later. Bye, guys.